Welcome back to the Belonging Place, where we talk about belonging and connection as an antidote to addiction and loneliness, and where we share the belief that every person's story matters and that there are pivotal moments and pain points in people's lives where connection makes a difference. And my guest today is
Andy Proctor.
Andy Proctor.
Yeah, what's up?
Okay, so Andy is one of my near and dear good friends. I'm very excited to have him here for many reasons. But my first question for you, Andy, is do you remember how we met?
So this is my memory.
Okay.
Is like we were both bloggers.
That sounds so old.
Yeah, like back when blogging was like
cool.
The thing, right?
Yeah.
It was like 2011, 2012, we're like, yeah. And everybody, it was like all these like mommy bloggers. There's like a New York Times post about mommy bloggers,
Yes. Yeah.
And like you wrote a post, it seems like it was something about like healthy sexuality or something like that. And then
let's talk about sex.
Yeah. And it went like
viral,
right? And then like I wrote a post or two and like kind of went like, LDS blogosphere viral, so it was like, that's kind of where it was like, okay, I knew who Kylee Shields was,
That's so funny that I forgot that it was that post.
Yeah. And like you knew who Andy Proctor was.
Yeah.
But it was like we didn't actually meet until we started that little group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
That's how I remember. But
do you remember?
But some of my meet cues are vague.
Yeah.
I don't really. It'll be interesting when we have Stacey,
what is
your
our
wife,
friend
on here,
anniversary?
because I don't really remember Stacey's either. It'll be interesting if she remembers. I mean, it's in relation to you, but
yeah.
Okay. Well, my next question is, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so I am a marketing professional and a Ph.D. Candidate currently.
ABD, we call that.
ABD, yeah.
All the dissertation.
Yeah.
Okay.
So defended the prospectus, and I'm just working on my dissertation study.
Okay.
And I am married, second marriage, and coming up on 11 years with Stacey. Yeah, so pretty awesome. The 20th of June. So we're
Love that.
It's awesome. We still don't know where we're gonna take our picture, but yeah. And we have a 2-year-old. So yeah, he just turned 2 last week.
And he has a really great name.
William Apollo.
Yeah.
Proctor. Yeah, super cool.
Tell us, you've done a lot of things. Maybe give us a little rundown
Okay.
of some of the jobs you've had and some of the things you've done. Yeah.
So let's see here. I have started businesses, mostly like e-commerce. I've worked with MLMs as both a distributor as well as like on the corporate side. I have been in everything from SEO to social media, like management to influencer marketing to, affiliate stuff, I built an app once, back when apps were cool. Yeah. I had a podcast. So podcast, More Happy Life, which you've been a guest on.
Which we'll post a lot of these things in the notes, but yeah.
Yeah, nice. So, More Happy Life podcast.
You were like a early adopter to Periscope, I feel like.
Yeah. I was like the number one Periscoper in positive psychology for a while. Yeah, exactly. It was like the fastest growing app in the whole app store, and then all of a sudden it died. That was fun though.
Yeah.
I miss Periscope.
You were Periscope.
That was amazing. Yeah, and Periscope was super cool.
New Skin.
Yeah, so it worked
multiple capacities, right?
Yeah. So it was kind of a data analyst there, and then tried to help like create like a social selling model. Created an event there, kind of like a TEDx style.
Love.
Yeah, that was fun. Like 1,000 words. That was super fun at New Skin, and then because of that, I actually got invited to be on TEDxBYU, like committee or board. And so did that for a couple of years. That was super fun. Brought in some really cool people to speak on that stage, including...
Speaking of creating belonging places.
Yes. Yeah. No, totally.
Sorry,
and including my current advisor, Julianne Holt-Lundstad. So I was always trying to find like the positive psychology or like, psychology or like science, kind of science of happiness related stuff or people. So one of the most, I think it's actually the most viewed TEDx talk from TEDxBYU, was Jody Wellman. And it's about like remembering how many Mondays you have left.
Oh, okay.
It's really good. It's so good. It's got like 1.4 million views.
Okay.
So yeah, highly recommend it.
Yay.
Like, think
and
about
you
your death.
brought her in?
Yeah.
Good job, Andy.
Yeah. So positive psychology person. She's amazing.
So speaking of positive psychology, I want to take just a pause because there's going to be a bunch of listeners / viewers who don't really know what that is.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really brought you and me and some of our other friends, some of them have then gotten married and moved on and done different things. But one of the things that really pulled a bunch of us together besides blogging was that we all loved positive psychology. Some of us, meaning you, one of them, went and got actual certificates in this. So I know it's a big topic, but if you could kind of tell us, what are you talking about when you talk about the science of happiness, or what are you talking about when you talk about positive psychology?
Yeah.
Besides, we want to be happy.
Yeah, no, great question. I love that. So positive psychology, if you look at psychology, because like I'm getting an actual psychology, like Ph.D, like in psychology, right? Like social psychology. So oftentimes psychology is the study of like what's wrong with us, like how we can fix what's broken, right? And positive psychology is kind of more looking at like, let's not think about what's wrong with us, but like let's really dial into like what's right with us and like what makes us thrive, and let's study that really intensely so that we can figure out how to thrive and then operationalize how to thrive and be happy and teach other people how to do that. So what does that look like? There's one of the prominent people in the field, or like some people say he's the father of positive psychology. His name is Martin Seligman. And he came up with, or at least coined, this PERMA theory of positive psychology, or of flourishing. And some people have added a letter on the end of that, H or V. So I'll go through those like very quickly. So positive emotions is the P. Engagement or flow. Some people maybe have heard of the book Flow.
Yeah.
Relationships, meaning, and achievement. And then some people add V for vitality or H for health. Because it's like, well, how can you be happy if you don't have really good health, or if you're not like, physically, have that vitality. So yeah, PERMA V or PERMA H, PERMA, is like this theory that I think a lot of positive psychology people support. There's been a lot of like spin-offs of it as well, but I like that one. It's pretty solid.
And I think it's UPenn has a website, right? Authentic Happiness, because I use worksheets from that.
Yeah.
Or I ask my students to fill out. There's it's called a VIA character strengths survey that I use with my clients a lot, actually, when I'm doing an identity module. So, and he started that, or no? The Authentic Happiness?
Yes. Yeah. He wrote a book called Authentic Happiness, and then, AuthenticHappiness.org or something like that, or .com. Maybe they go to the same thing.
I think Angela Ducksworth's Grit survey is on there as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a ton of different scales and surveys that you can take for free.
And they're free.
Yep.
And you can shout out to that website.
Seriously.
Love it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's free. It's awesome. You can kind of track your happiness over time if you want. If you're like me and like to, collect data on yourself by wearing all your, devices and taking surveys and stuff like that. So it's fun. But yeah, that's a good resource. Another really great resource from somebody who's local, actually, his name is Jared Warren, and he's kind of the BYU positive psychology guy. awesome guy. Like he's
local being Utah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Local being Utah. Yes, good clarification. And he kind of has developed his own also like kind of theory as well, which I really like. And there's a lot of free trackers and surveys and scales on his website called mybestself101.com.
Oh, this is new
Super
to me.
awesome.
Okay.
No, yeah, it's fantastic.
Okay.
Like I love his stuff. He's on my dissertation committee.
Okay.
But yeah, really cool guy, great resources, and he's got some great like meditations and like really really cool stuff. Like you should probably have him on this podcast even.
Okay.
So I'll connect you if you want.
I want to, in the big world of positive psychology, you could probably spend a ton of time on this. I want to focus on the R.
Yes. Yeah.
And I want to ask you, Andy, and whether this is evidence-based or not, I'm actually just asking your opinion. Sure, you can put evidence in there, but
Yeah.
in the years and your certification, and you're just, I feel like you're one of the people that has done more work and more research. You probably could have a double PhD in this. When it comes to the R of positive psychology, what have you found, or what is the importance of it? Like if you could tell us if we could glean some tidbits from ours, remember, is the relationship part of positive psychology. I just want to give you the floor to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So there's tons of research on this. The longest running study, I think, in history is the Harvard study. Waldinger is over that currently, I think. And he looked at, and past researchers who were over it have looked at what is the number one predictor of both health and happiness, like life satisfaction, well-being, and it's positive relationships, right? And so that's a big one, right? That's really interesting study. There's a lot of really cool research on the impacts of health, as well as the impacts of happiness. And outside of that study, one of the ones that I think was really fascinating to me, that kind of got me thinking, just with my own family history of like heart health and stuff, is there's this little town in Pennsylvania called Roseto. And this town was just jam-packed full of Italians, right? Like This is back in like the 50s, 60s. And there was an epidemiologist who was, I think, a doctor as well in a nearby hospital, who was just studying the area and like heart health in different towns. And they were just trying to figure out like, why did Roseto have such good heart health? Like especially in the men, which typically men have worse heart health in general than women, and as they age. And so they found that even though they were like smoking cigars and like
eating,
frying their sausages in lard, and just like eating, like drinking like alcohol and all these things that are supposed to be really bad for your heart health, right? And they had better heart health than any of the neighboring cities. And the only thing that they could figure out as to why that was the case was the tight-knit community that they had. They were just they belonged, right? The doors were left open. There was no locks. Like everybody knew everybody. They always like kind of got together to like eat and, celebrate and talk and get through things together. So it's a really interesting, they coined it like the Roseto effect, because, our health can really be impacted by how close we feel, how much belonging we have in our lives.
On that note, this is what you studied, right?
Yeah.
So I want to open the door to you, just talk a little bit about, first of all, what got you into this particular PhD program, because that was its own journey, and then what you studied and maybe what you learned from what you studied. I know that's a big question, but
yeah. Okay, let's start with the first part.
Yeah.
You might have to remind me the other ones. Okay. But so how did I get into it? So PERMA, right? Like I looked at the whole theory, fascinated with every single one of those, right? Including the health. And I was like, man, if I had to choose one of these, like what one has the biggest impact? of all of them, right? Like long term, both like eudaimonic and hedonic, like happiness in life, like both the like pleasure and the meaning, like what's the best one, right? And it's the R, like it really is the relationships, and best bang for your buck. So I'd always been fascinated with friendship. I'd kind of had my own like theories about it, just because like you and I are both kind of these like just love connecting with people, love to like connect other people with the right people too. And I just started thinking, man, social capital is so powerful, and like friendship is so interesting to me.
Generative.
And like so important at every stage of life. And it changes so much as you start to age as well. And so I just was like, this is something that I really want to like dive into. Like I could spend years looking into this, right?
Yeah.
So that's where I started to think, oh, well, maybe I should do, at some point I'd love to do a PhD. And I had a couple of ideas of like, what would I be okay with studying for years, right? and so that's when so in the meantime, I was at New Skin, and I was doing the 1,000 Words speaker series, and then the TEDxBYU came along. And then it was like 2019 or so when I was like, all right, I need something new. And I left New Skin for a startup, really cool job, chief happiness officer.
Love that.
Fun, app, trying to decrease loneliness and stuff. But in the meantime, I was doing TEDxBYU, and I was like, okay, who's the next one, that I'm going to select for this next year? Kind of the positive psychology or like person. And I remember seeing all these TED Talks about loneliness research and how much our relationships impact our health. And it was all Julianne Holt-Lundstad's research. But she'd never given her own TED Talk. And I was like, this is crazy. There's like 20 TED Talks about her research, but she's never given any of them. And so I reached out to her, and I was like, hey, do you want to give a TED Talk?
Stage.
Yeah. Do you want to? We'd love to have you at TEDxBYU. And she just happens to be a professor at BYU. So, so we did that. We invited her. I was her coach, kind of helped her through that process, and got her on stage. It was supposed to. Our event was scheduled for March 20th, 2020.
Yeah. Dun, dun, dun.
Literally the day that everything shut down. So a week before, it was like, yeah, it's not gonna happen, and so she didn't actually give that until 2021, which we did do the event that year, like masked, and like it was a different event. It wasn't live. It was different. Very highly produced event. And anyways, long story short, though. We developed that relationship. I was able to dig into her research a little bit more because of that, and then I interviewed her on my podcast, and we really dove deep, right, into lots of different things. And I kept asking her at the end. I was like, "Hey, so I know like loneliness is so bad, and like social isolation is like so bad for your health in all these different ways. But like if you were to create like an RDA, right, like a recommended daily, for like what kind of like the other side looks like, right? What is connection? Like what do we need in terms of our health, right? If it were a vitamin, how many would you need to take?" And she's like, "That's such a good question." And I get asked that a lot. And at the end she's like, "Have you ever thought about doing a PhD?" And I was like, "Matter of fact, I have." And I'd love to, study this, like, and I actually have some theories that I've been playing around with, and like, I'd love to share them with you, and so she's like, "Well, you should apply," so I applied and got in, and yeah, she was my advisor, which was super cool, really, really cool. She's done some amazing work with like the U.S. Surgeon General recently. She was the lead science editor on the Surgeon General advisory about social isolation and loneliness, and then she and I worked together on a project with Eventbrite, to look at like, how do events impact our, social connection and loneliness, and what are the aspects, like what kinds of events have different impacts, like in person versus virtual, or like, active versus passive events. Do you go with people versus not, like it was really interesting research. So that's kind of how I got into the PhD and kind of studied with Julianne.
Before we go to the next part of the question, part of what I've been doing on this podcast is kind of stripping away people in their arrival, like how they got there, and pulling back a curtain a little bit for the realness of how you got there. Because I feel like a lot of times people in our lives, or audience members, or people that are listening, I think it's hard sometimes for people to hear people that are doing great things and they're like, and I did my PhD. I happen to personally know, if you're okay, that your journey to your PhD and where you are wasn't super linear and it wasn't super easy. I don't know if you mind sharing with people a little bit of what it took to get there, because I think that's real. Like, it's real to tell people, like, okay, I did end up getting, I'm working through my PhD, but if you're okay to peel back the layers a little bit, will you give us a little bit of the journey before that?
Totally. No, thanks for reminding me of that, because that's so important to remember, especially at the end, So I had applied 3 times for a master's program in positive psychology, Master's of Applied Positive Psychology at the University of Pennsylvania, Ivy League, like really cool school.
Best recommendations you could possibly get. I remember friends and us thinking, you already have kind of a master's in it. What is this about? It was hard. For you. It was also hard for us watching you, because I was like, I don't know who else would be better to get this.
It was crazy. Like, I had a podcast about positive psychology. I had like
certificate.
It was just, I didn't actually have the certificate yet.
Oh, okay.
Until after, I was like, okay, I'm just going to call it, No, and actually, you're right. I did actually get the certificate.
That's what I thought.
On the last round. On the last round. So it was like
you were
one of those
all
things,
the things in your
that
favor.
I was like, why? And I went out and visited. Like, I had presented at the like International Positive Psychology Association, like World Congress on Positive Psychology. Like, I knew the people. Like, I don't know what it was. Right?
None
it
of
was
us do.
Crazy. And they only accept, I think, like 40 or 50 people every year. And I think I felt like at least my last application was just like I don't swear, but like it was bad A. Like, if
And again, you had like there couldn't be better recommendations in addition to your experience, in addition to your application, right?
No.
I mean, it really.
Yeah, and so it was very disappointing. Like, it hurt. And on the last one, I remember with Stacy, and we were talking about it, and she was like, okay, if you don't get in, like, it's because there's something better. Like, this time it's not necessarily about, the rejection at all. It's really about like
Closed door.
The door's closed, like, deliberately, because something else is better that's coming. And so, anyways, so yeah, it was rough though. I mean, you read my letter of recommend, or my statement of intent, like.
I guess I wanted to pull back the curtain, because 3 times to get a master's with all the experience that you have in getting a no, it would be easy to quit at that point. Like, you weren't really struggling. I mean, you had gotten jobs and you were making money, and you could have just been like, I'm just going to be where I'm at. I think it's fair to say that part of your journey, and part of the thing that I love about you, and part of the thing that I really appreciate in our friendship, is that grit and that fail forward, and that just like, I have goals and you're just tenacious at it. And if I'm not going to get it this way, I'm going to go get it somewhere else. And just because you get somewhere else doesn't mean it's easy either. I guess I want to say, like, I don't know how you thought that your PhD was going to go. And I haven't actually had that much of a conversation with you, but it seems like it has been quite a journey. So even when the door opens, and even when you have a great advisor, and even when you have a topic that you really like, it's not like piece of cake.
Well, yeah, and I feel like that was the door that opened when the others closed, right?
Yeah.
Um, and and it was funny because like I even applied to like a backup school just in case, it was like, yeah, let's just see, and like, and it was like easier, like it was like not as competitive kind of program, and like I didn't get into that either, and
Oh,
I was like,
really?
what
So
the,
that was a big
yeah,
no.
yeah, and so I was like, okay, I am supposed to be here with Julianne
At
at
this time.
BYU at this time. Like it was just that it was meant to be. And so yeah, but then yeah, going through the program, yeah, I mean anybody who's done a PhD, a doctoral program, like it's brutal. Like I tried to work full time my first semester and do like assistantship and be a student full time.
And be a husband.
And be a husband. We didn't have a baby at that time, but it was like, oh my gosh, like
I can't do all the things.
I couldn't. Like that was when I literally hit like the time wall of like, okay, like there's just not enough time. And I was neglecting both my job and my assistantship and my marriage. Like it was rough. And so like I'd committed to Stacy, like I'm gonna either be working during this or like figure something out, right? Like but but then like I had to, it was hard for me because I was like, I don't want to quit my PhD.
Yeah.
But like it's been hard because, until I just barely recently got a job, like I'd get grants and stuff and, I made, you make not much money as a PhD student.
Yeah.
Like it covers the tuition and stuff, like at least where I went to school at BYU in this specific program. But like, what you get paid for your assistantship is like very small.
Yeah.
It's like,
I appreciate your honesty because
yeah.
I also was there watching that dynamic. I just think it's part of the story that I think we often don't hear when people have their PhDs or they have their business, or like we don't often get to peel back and be like, what was the impact on the relationships in the process? And I think there's a growing and a stretching, and I think that's a refining for everybody.
Yeah.
I'm sure that Stacey would say that on her side too, right? Not all of it was fun growing, and not all of it was fun stretching.
No.
And then you guys end up having a kid in that process, which is a whole other, like we could talk all about that. And you were doing the thing where you were supposed to be, and it was hard, and I imagine there was some great moments. Can you tell us a little bit about what you actually studied and what you kind of learned from that?
Yeah. So I mean, in this program, you do kind of your basic psychology, kind of social psychology. You do some behavioral neuroscience, like looking at like how the brain actually works, which was like one of my favorite classes. It was fascinating. We could do another entire episode just on that. Yeah. Like so cool. But then we also have to pick like, what we study specifically. And so, I initially was going to study friendship, like adult friendship, and how differentiation in adult friendship and evolution of adult friendship impacts different types of health markers. I'd kind of been a nerd myself, like collecting a lot of data on myself, like with like all kinds of little consumer grade devices for years before I like ever started. I get these little things where like measure your breathing patterns and like have like algorithms to tell you like, oh, it looks like you're focused or you're anxious or you're whatever. And then it would tell you when it was, and you're like, whoa, that's interesting. And it was like during this conversation or like when I was at church or or whatever. Right.
Yeah.
And so that was interesting. Oura Ring, like Apple Watch, like heart rate variability. I've worn like glucose monitors. Like I love collecting data on myself. Like I'm maybe a little bit obsessed, but I always thought, okay, like could we do this on a like actual research, like with these devices,
like a physiological research about the relationships.
Yeah. So I did do one study so far, like in using Garmin devices that can capture like beat to beat heart rate interval data. And then we like derived heart rate variability from that. And so just like a very quick brief, like what that is like your heartbeat is not exactly the same every like beat, right? Like it alters, like it's different. So that that variation is like higher variation in your heartbeat is good.
Okay.
Right? It's really healthy, both for your physical and your mental health, actually. It's a sign of your ability to adapt and like recover. And so I was like, well, you know, if social ostracism and loneliness and like social relationships of isolation, like loneliness, if that stuff stresses us out like crazy, and stress causes like impacts on the parasympathetic nervous system, then like this has got to show up in heart rate variability, right? I was like, there's got to be we're gonna find something, you know. And so I did it with like a really small sample of very healthy young white Mormon kids.
Thank you for your sample size.
Yeah, like there was like 68 of them, and we actually still found a difference, like a very small difference, between those who had higher loneliness levels and lower loneliness levels in terms of heart rate variability, which was kind of cool. So I'm kind of replicating the same study for my dissertation, and so it's really there's like 3 different studies within the study.
Okay.
But like first of all, we're gonna look at resting heart rate variability, and then chronic loneliness, which is like basically loneliness over time, like over the last year, or over the last, it's like
being single for 20 years.
Yeah. And there's different types of loneliness, right? We're measuring that too, right? So there's
I feel to say I'm very blessed with a great belonging place.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I'd be super interested. Actually,
well,
Kylee.
one of our other guests that I recently interviewed, he talked about a mother-in-law who was surrounded by her family, even moved in, but was so lonely, even in that, because many times happiness or is derived in meaning, in like your purpose and meaning. So that even when you're connected or physically doing things, if you don't necessarily have something to look forward to or meaning, you can still feel, and I'm thinking about empty nesters, and I'm thinking about just different stages of people's lives. Anyway.
Oh yeah.
Coming back to this phase. So you were talking about chronic.
Yeah. So there's 2 different ways we're measuring loneliness. One is just like the basic, like it's called the UCLA loneliness scale, and it's just like, kind of asking about, do you feel, a sense of belonging? Like not necessarily like those same words, but like, do you feel connected to people, and do you feel understood, basically, and then we're also looking at a different scale, which I am excited to look at, because I think loneliness isn't just like one type of loneliness, like overall. I think you can have romantic loneliness, friendship loneliness, and then family loneliness.
Yeah.
And like feeling misunderstood or a lack. So like loneliness, just to like define it really fast, is really like this, it's a subjective perception of isolation. Like you could be together with a bunch of people. You could be in the same room with a lot of people, like at a conference or an event or at school or at your work or in your family, and you could feel completely misunderstood, or you could feel like
disconnected.
Yeah, disconnected because you aren't fully yourself. You haven't actually showed your true colors in some way.
Or you have and you've been rejected, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So you can feel that in different areas, right? Whether it's like friendship, romantic, or family. At least 3 areas, right? Like there may be more. But this scale looks at those 3. So I'm going to look at those as well as just the overall like loneliness levels over time, and see if their resting heart rate variability is different with different levels of loneliness and different levels of different types of loneliness. So that's the first aspect, which I'm really excited. I think that lonelier people will have like
less variability. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay.
Worse. Like
the null hypothesis is this. Yeah. Okay.
Heart rate variability.
That's fascinating.
Yep. So, which is, an interesting way of looking at like, this is why loneliness impacts heart health, because it does.
Why the Surgeon General says it's like smoking.
Yeah, like
a pack of cigarettes, or I don't know.
Yeah,
sorry,
15.
Okay.
Up to 15. Yeah, no, it's similar to smoking up to 15 cigarettes per day.
But it's like a leading cause of harm right now, right? Or like
yeah, there's definitely an epidemic. It's interesting because I think social isolation, I kind of try to point the spotlight on that more.
Yeah.
Because I actually don't want to get rid of loneliness. It sounds kind of weird, right? Because loneliness, like, as I read and studied more about it, like, it's like hunger. Like, what if we got rid of hunger? Like, we wouldn't actually...
There's a sense of coming to know who you are, or coming to a creator, or something that... Yeah, if you get rid of it altogether.
It's a signal. It's a biological signal, actually.
I like that. Kind of like emotions or signals, yeah.
Yeah, like it's a signal that we need more connection. Like we need to feel belonging.
Yeah, if that's gone, we have a problem.
Yeah, and so like, and it's not like I think it's a good thing, but it's also like it's adaptive, or like, it has... Like, why has it stayed around for so long, right? Like, evolutionarily.
Chronic loneliness. I think if you don't take the hint or act on it, similarly.
Yeah, chronic loneliness would be great to get rid of that, right? Yeah. So, but like loneliness at all, like we need that. We need that. We need to connect. Like if we don't feel that drive to like, oh, I need to reach out to so-and-so, or like, gosh, I feel like alone right now. And you feel those feels and you actually like react to those.
I think some of our social stuff that we have, our social media, our gaming, I think some of that is sort of tampering with this signal that says I need to get outside, or I need to go be creative, or boredom. I know loneliness and boredom often get mixed up, but in the similar vein of, man, I wish we had more boredom for our kids, because that's where creativity is born and things are born. And if you're never bored, then if things are just fed to you all the time, right? Then like, how do you think and create and problem solve? And similarly, if we're not left alone, or we don't hunger for connection, then I love that.
So speaking of that, it's a really good segue, because that's kind of what I want to look at as like the second portion of my study. So we're going to measure their heart rate variability when they get there.
Okay.
After they've taken this survey about, loneliness and a bunch of other stuff. Including friendship. Like I'm looking at a lot of different like types of friendship and relationships, and like, both quantity as well as like quality, and positivity. And then I'm gonna also look at whether connecting with a human in person using a validated like intervention that maybe people have read about on the New York Times. It's the 36 questions that make you fall in love with anyone, is like this New York Times article that like that like popularized this study by Arthur Aaron and his colleagues, that they took 36 questions that were basically programmed or like created to create this reciprocal escalating disclosure. So like make it so
which
that
we know causes connection, right? Because I'm vulnerable and then you're vulnerable. Okay, that's
and then you feel close to the person, right? And so by the end, like of this, like asking these questions, you're like, whoa, like I like you, I mean, it works.
Love this.
You should try it if you haven't already tried it.
Look, I haven't.
Just be wise who you pick.
But this is gonna be my next dating tool. Hey, so do you? Just kidding.
Yeah, no. Look,
Want to sit down?
Google the questions. You should link to that in your show notes. But yeah, so we're using those with the human research assistant and the participant, and then the second condition is the same questions but with an artificial intelligence.
Oh.
And so
interesting.
Yeah, so they have a voice. It's like it sounds very human. There's no face, but it's extremely complex and like very emotionally intelligent and compassionate and like programmed to be like responsive and a really good listener, but also asking the same questions and answering as if it were a human. Its name is Millie.
Okay.
And so anyways, it's going to be really interesting to see how they compare. Like, do people feel closer to a human or to an AI? I think they're going to feel closer to a human. But then there's a control condition where they just read boring manuals about how to put bookshelves together and stuff. And I think there's going to be more like feelings of connection with the AI than with like the control, right? Like,
right.
So it'll be interesting. And we're measuring their heart rate variability the whole time. And at the end, we asked them to think about how connected they feel to the person they were just with, and just kind of like ponder on that while we like collect their last like heart rate variability, and we'll see if there's any change.
Yeah.
So it's very nerdy. That's
interesting.
Very controlled. Extremely rigorous. Like, you have to jump through a lot of hoops from a like human protection standpoint and all that stuff. But we're doing it in BYU and at University of California, San Diego.
Okay.
So we'll have a really diverse sample.
Love that.
And it'll be cool. So
I want to stop for just a second.
Yes.
If we pull scientist Andy out of the equation for a second, and just your life, because you are one of the things that I love about you as my friend, you already described this, but you're a connector and you are a builder. And through the different stages of your life, through before you were married, after you were first married, second marriage, being married but without kids, married with kids, moving, different jobs and things, you have always seemingly found friends and have made friends and have figured out how to sort of cultivate really good relationships without using very much data, but just using your own experience. What do you think the impact of friendships have?
Oh man, so huge. I like after my first, like when I was going through my first, my only divorce. I mean, it's hard for anybody to go through a divorce, right? Like, and I was a part of this like a cappella group, and I remember I didn't know how to just tell them that I was like thinking about, leaving, and then like one night I just like kind of broke down and was like, I just like was crying, and like, I mean, we're all just like a bunch of men, but we're men who sing, so there's like a little bit of, and we feel the feels together, and they were so supportive, and it was like they were my tribe, during this like really difficult time that was super confusing, and like, so like it was just hard. It didn't make, anyways, it's hard. Any divorce is so complex. So that's just one illustration, right? Of like, we go through so many life shifts, right? Like life quakes, whatever you want to call them, like transitions in life. Like whether or not you plan for them, they are going to happen.
Yeah.
And whether that's a health thing or a job or a move or a relationship or a child or a death or, whatever, like there's so many things that you're not going to plan for. Like, we're extremely bad at like predicting our own futures, right? Like the research shows that. And so friends for me have really been, like the lifeblood that have kept me thinking about or have reminded me of like why I exist.
Yeah, they're a reflection, right?
Yeah, they are. They like help me remember, oh yeah, that's the Andy Proctor that I want to be.
They hold the evidence of your capability, right?
Yeah.
Like, as you were describing that, I was thinking, I've been talking on some of these podcasts and other places about how much I value preventative mental health. And I just realized as you're sitting here, the best preventative mental health you can give yourself is good friends.
Yes.
Not just preventative mental health, it's like a life prevention. If you can put some really good friends in your life, then no matter what happens, you've built like a safety net.
Yes.
And like, I don't know how people do it that don't. Like, this is why I'm doing the podcast. This is why I believe it so strongly. If I could pick any topic to talk about, it's this. It's that when people build these tribes, when they have these wells, when you join a group, when you create a group that people can join, it's the thing that will save you in the end, right? Like when you fall or when you're whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that that's one of the reasons why people who live so long live so long is
because of their connection.
yeah.
Their tribes,
their network, their connection, like they are, not everybody, but like I would be willing to say that most people who live into their 90s and 100, like they are very well connected. Like there was an article that was written about that by Julianne, about how, if you want to live long, like be popular, sounds a little vain, but like honestly, it's also survival. Like, and
or I would say, I haven't done the research for this, but if you don't have so many friends, have few friends, but deep roots.
Yeah.
That are like all
yeah.
connected and that are like steady. Right?
Yeah. I think, and I'm just going to add to that.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to like kind of upgrade it.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I think that is absolutely necessary. And so, but I also think like you need the depth, but I also think you need like this breadth, right? Like of kind of, you don't want to go like so wide that you're just like overwhelmed, because I know what that's like too, because I love being social.
Yeah.
But
you don't want to build an echo chamber.
No. Yeah. And I'm just thinking like over time, like keeping the diversity, like diversifying your friendship. Like if you think about like investments, right? Like if you just have a house or you just have a 401k, like something might go wrong with the stock market or with real estate or with the whatever, and you're not gonna like, it's better to diversify, right? Like, right. And so your investments, so like from a relationship standpoint, like it's really important to diversify your relationship investments.
Love that. Times and seasons in your life, right?
You never know, like things are gonna change. And like, I think about the friends that have, like, I have a friend who I feel so close to, but I see him like every 2 years now, and I just saw him like a couple weeks ago, which was awesome. And it was, it was just like we never, stopped, but at the same time, it's like, okay, he lives in Idaho and I live in Utah. We both have kids. Like, we're both like crazy busy. And like, I need friends who I can go for a walk with every Friday morning or every Saturday morning, right? Like I need friends who I can just be like, hey, like, can we just talk?
Yeah.
Friends who like invite me on a podcast, right? Friends who just like are there right now, and those there right now friends may shift over time, but like I guess I'm just saying that like I think it's important to have both like the breadth as well as the depth, because you need the depth.
Yeah.
If you don't have the depth, you will feel lonely.
I think this is part of like these tribes, right? Like you said, the a cappella group or the this, or when you go to school. Yeah. And that as you grow in your life, you have to figure out how to continue to either create those or join those. It gets harder and harder as the system itself doesn't create them for you, when there's not groups at college or when there's not this. And part of what I want to invite people and hope people can hear is that like that ability never stops, even if the system itself doesn't create it for you, right? Our ability as humans to continue to tribe or to create what I call wells, or to invite people into those wells, I think is this essential diversity, right? I think it's what keeps us generative. It keeps us growing. Part of my favorite thing about my friends is as they grow and change and get different jobs, and as our family and their life changes and we stay friends, that also is a change, even though they're my same friends, because they're learning and growing different things, and then I'm learning with them and vice versa, right? Like
totally.
There's something about old and long friends too, that especially with this positive psychology we've been talking about, that really are trying to grow themselves, that causes this great, I don't know, or just like we're just compounding goodness.
Totely.
I don't know how else to say that, but
it's like both are so good for us.
Yeah.
And there's a really cool, like that I've felt a lot. Like there's a cool line of study that's called weak ties, where like it's the people who you just like in the Uber, that you're just chatting and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to see you again, but I love you, like,
Dude,
you're
this
amazing.
is our bus driver. We had every time we go to, my nonprofit does these tours, we stay with the bus driver for a week, and by the end, you're just crying. I'm never going to see you again, but we love you.
Yeah, exactly. And we're more likely to disclose sometimes to those, thinking because we think maybe we won't see them again.
Yeah.
And so, like, it allows us the benefit of being able to disclose things that we may not have, and also them to support in ways that they may not have if they were like, okay, if I had to hang out with you every day, I probably wouldn't be this supportive, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of really cool benefits from weak ties as well as the deep ties, so, or strong ties. But we need both. And I think, like, I'm actually really excited to be back in an office space again, seeing like random people every day, that I don't necessarily know very well, but I'm like, hey, I remember you, and just like those quick little like happy things. Like I was walking in the, just in the hall today, and I don't know who this person was, but she was like, hey, have a great rest of your day. And I was like, you too. It's like those little things. And I'm like, oh, like, I love this. And I think because like there's so much remote work now, and there's so much like even hybrid work, right? Like, I think it's important to find those wells, to find those places.
Fostering all types. Andy, I'm going to ask you a question I asked at the very beginning, but I'm going to give you a caveat that you can't say anything that you do or that's your natural inclination. If I were to say, Andy, tell me just about yourself, no job related, no nothing, what would you say? If we stripped all that away?
Oh, I love that question so much. I am a tender-hearted, man who loves philosophy, storytelling, romance, and who's a goofball, and who is like deep, likes to like swim in deep water, like intellectually, spiritually, and who is like really a deep soul, who has really big questions about existence and love and life and how it's all going to end.
Can I reflect some things too? I agree with all that. I just because some people may not know you that are on here, I also see you as so fun, because you just described one side of you, which is I love. It's the part that initially attracted me to you, but you are the guy who has a one-person trampoline that jumps on the trampoline just because. You are the guy that took breakdancing classes.
See, I was trying to say stuff that not that I do though, so I was like,
you're right. That's why I'm saying it.
I am a breakdancer.
Yes, but I'm gonna fill in some of the pieces. I did ask you to describe it that way because I think that's hard for people to do that.
Yeah.
You're also, you did say goofball, which I love. You play the cello.
Yes. Yeah.
And you learned to play the cello as an adult, which is a hard thing to do. You sing. I think like you aren't afraid to make mistakes or be a fool or try things and then say that didn't work. You are the guy that has friends' pictures up on the wall because you value them, not in person, but just also like as a value. You're the husband that, man, when you talk about romantic, one of my favorite things about you, kind of mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, but people aren't going to know this. You're like, we don't know where we're going to take our picture, because you guys take a picture every year and it's like an inception. Picture within a picture within a picture within a picture. I'm not sure how you're going to keep doing it because you might be this big at that point, but
you can't see me anymore.
You can't? Okay.
No, not the first ones.
You guys also have like a box of things that you can do for dates that you pull from and do. I mean, if I were to describe you, and it's hard to describe you outside of your wife at this point because I'm also friends with her. I would describe you as so intentional. And I don't want that to sound what's like in the hospital when everything is like, what is that word when everything is like cleaned up and it's all white, and anyway,
Yeah.
I can't think of the word.
Sterile.
Sterile. I don't want that to sound sterile. What I mean by so intentional is that I think you work hard in all of your relationships. I think you're intentional about and that intentionality, because sometimes you show others what that is, like you invite them into that, invites them, gives them permission to be more intentional. I think I'm a much better friend for being your friend. I think you have shown me that, like, to grow friendships, you gotta plant seeds that come back later. You gotta give bids of connection. Those bids of connection need to be returned. And that there's times and seasons for that, but that it's really important to put energy into people, because that is the best energy that's going to come back more than things. I think more than other things. But you're also just good. Like, you're good with money. You're good. You're like a cat. No matter what the situation, you land on your feet, I think. And this is one of the things. And you're not perfect, and you have problems, and you're like a real person, and you don't hide that either. And so there's a part of you, it's like, I can do it too. If he can do it, if they can do it, I can do it too. And I think we need that in our friends and in our relationships. Some people who are honest enough that say, like, don't just look at all the good that's happening. Don't look at our houses and our things, or even when you're talking about our financial investments, because those are just things.
Yeah.
That you worked hard to do them, but I'm grateful for the work, the intentionality that you put into things, and I hope that you feel that it also, that you gain dividends from that.
Oh, totally. Yeah. And like from you especially too. And I'm like so thankful for our friendship. And like it's powerful.
Before we end, is there anything else when you think of the words belonging or connection, or when we were talking about tribes, or when we were talking about just sort of this, I know this is a vague topic, but when you think about this, is there anything else you want to share with us?
One more thought, just as you were talking before, is like, so I'm working now in my job about like with an incubator, which basically is like this, like you never know if it's gonna actually grow, right? Like it's like when you have a garden and you're like, okay, let's plant all these seeds, and hopefully I get like
some harvest.
Yeah, right. You never know which one's gonna like kind of die, or which one like might be like this amazing plant, right, with lots of fruit. And I think, like you said with seeds, I think with friendships, like keep planting seeds, and like it's as you know, now 40-year-old who's like looking at the next half of life, right, or the next part of life, and thinking like, okay, like what's gonna make this awesome? Like, I think we need to think about continuing to plant seeds. It's hard. As an adult, it's so hard. It's like you said, it's not programmed in. Yeah. Like it was in elementary school. The system or also high school doesn't or college.
Create that for us.
Yeah, exactly. It's not in the system. And I'm hoping that things change to shift to where it is more like programmatic. But until it does, you know, if you're feeling that loneliness, if you're feeling like, gosh, I do want more friends, or like I need to connect more, or I haven't felt that connection for a while, like listen to that.
Yeah.
Listen to it.
Lean in
and like go there, like, you know, listen to your heart, and
join a tribe, find a place. I think the first thing is, maybe you don't have the energy to create it, but join it, right? Yeah. Because once you do that, I think and you can feel supported, then you can grow it, right? Totally. I mean, the idea would be to move it forward. Yeah. Pay it forward, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You never know where a friendship might end up. You never know if the seed will turn into a tree, right? But like some might die, and that's life. That's normal. That's being human. But if you feel that desire, like listen to it. Like it's so important.
Love it. Thank you. I know there's a lot of things we could talk about.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you being on this podcast with us, and we will put some information in the liners about, so I'm going to get that study from you and put that on there that has the questions. I just appreciate you. Thanks, Andy.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.